So, over the past day, the SNES Classic pre-orders have been going live, sometimes even for as much as a whole minute before selling out. I think we all knew this was going to be a nightmare for folks to actually procure one of these systems, but that hasn't stopped people from voicing their disdain from the lack of stock. So today, I want to discuss Nintendo's consistent issue, it seems, with a lack of supply versus the demand for their products, and do things a little differently, sort of thinking out loud. I want to mostly run down the issues, the claims made against them, as well as back up why I think some of these issues may be occurring. Unfortunately, it's often a little more complicated than just, oh, they need to make more. Now, I've gone over this in the past with these classic systems, why I think Nintendo doesn't really care about meeting the demand for them. I'll link to that video at the end, but essentially, the Nintendo Switch is the system that's going to make them money. Anyone who follows gaming knows the money isn't really in hardware, but in software. And just like any other system, these minis have manufacturing and shipping costs that no doubt eat into the profit margins that each of them make. So rather than actually getting into the market of selling these systems, Nintendo just wants to use them as a little tease to get people craving the Nintendo experience. But what they really want you to buy is the Switch. I'm sorry, I know everyone thinks they're smarter, more business savvy than everyone at Nintendo combined, but simply put, if they wanted to keep making NES Classics, they'd still be making NES Classics. So clearly something is going on there that Nintendo doesn't like. And yeah, in my opinion, they're using these classic systems as mostly a tool to boost the general interest in the Nintendo brand. And if you agree with this thinking, it's not hard to see why they like to start trickling these things out a little bit before the holidays. They keep coming out again in small little waves through the holidays, and then in the earlier part of the following year, they kill it dead. But still, just like when I made that video, the issue remains. The Switches aren't exactly easy to get a hold of either. Even still today, most people can't just walk into a store or go online whenever they want and buy one. And I know your local store has 10 sitting on the shelf, they're so easy to get, okay, but that's not how it is everywhere. And I'm hoping for Nintendo's sake that the reason we are still seeing Switch shortages is that they're planning to hit us with a big wave of them around the holidays. And I'm still, even though we haven't heard much about it, I'm still anticipating a Mario Odyssey bundle. So with stock issues surrounding both the classic systems as well as the new Nintendo Switch, we can't help but wonder why. Well, there's a variety of factors to be sure. Again, whenever you're manufacturing something physical, you incur a lot of costs and need to get space on assembly lines and such, which can be a battle in of its own. That's one of the things I feel like we don't really discuss a lot, that there's a finite number of assembly lines out there, and you have all these people manufacturing electronics that are trying to get space on those assembly lines. But Nintendo is the one that is famous for understocking, whether it be these classic systems, Switches, amiibo, Wii's. They've had this issue for a long time, and it certainly doesn't seem like they're learning from past issues. I will say, in terms of consoles, I could see some hesitation after the Wii U. The Wii U was one of their poorest performing consoles in terms of sales, so I could see why they may have felt it necessary to hold back a little bit on the Switch. Don't forget, overstocking it can be just as much of an issue as understocking. This is the game these companies need to play, while for the consumer, it's always easy to argue, oh, well, we want, just make 3 times more, fill the shelves. But that's a lot of costs, which you can never be 100% sure on how a new product is going to perform before people can actually buy it. Sure, you can kind of gauge the level of interest leading up to it, but you're never really going to know until product is actually available to buy. And that shelf space is limited. It's not like everyone wants to just sit on these systems until they sell out eventually. Retailers want inventory that moves. And sure, these systems certainly are moving, but that was hardly a certainty before it was actually released. And like I said before, I'm sure the performance of the Wii U didn't make these people very reassured on how Nintendo's newest console was going to perform. And let's actually talk a little bit about amiibo. Certainly these are easier to manufacture, but there are a ton of them, and Nintendo's going to have to pick and choose which ones get a bigger run. Certain ones may end up being in higher demand than Nintendo expected, and perhaps by the time they even learn about the demand, they're already on to making the next wave. And in part, I think this is smart. Let's remember, the Toys to Life market has been largely on the downswing. When you look outside Nintendo, Skylanders burst onto the scene years ago and had various other companies trying to jump in, including Disney. But the hype for these things has really faded across the board. I believe Nintendo's greater number of figures and limited runs of them makes people more interested. It makes it feel like more of a hunt. There's definitely a collector mentality driving a lot of these sales, in my opinion. You know, when you see certain amiibo selling out and, you know, one gets announced that you actually might be interested, you can't help but think, oh, maybe I should just, pull the trigger on it as soon as I can. I don't want to risk it selling out and either missing out on it entirely or having to spend triple the price to buy it somewhere else. And quite often, amiibo do little, let's be honest, in the games. Sometimes they are awesome, like the Wolf Link amiibo bringing Wolf Link into Breath of the Wild. But more often than not, you get some random items or cosmetics. I think people are more so buying them as collectible figures, especially since you see so many characters getting attention that wouldn't otherwise. Like, sure, there's tons of merchandise you can buy of, the core Mario characters, but I don't know if, say, like, Corrin from Fire Emblem would be getting an actual action figure anytime soon, but there it is in amiibo form. You got both forms of Corrin. So yeah, there is a lot of planning that has to go into how these things are being made available at retail. And when you have to do a lot of planning, you have more room for mistakes. And I'm sure there's plenty of issues that we don't even hear about. But I do want to get into my final point, the thing I see consumers often accusing Nintendo of. People always want what they can't have. By maintaining a product shortage, they keep their products on everyone's mind. Nintendo gets tons of free press and advertising whenever one of these products becomes available. I mean, every time, you're watching it probably now with the SNES Classic, every time a retailer has it available, boom, GameStop, boom, Kotaku, everyone's got an article, everyone's talking about it. And as people, the consumers, miss out on these opportunities, that only makes them want it more. Like, let's take the new SNES Classic. Even if you're on the fence about it, as an idea, maybe you're like, oh, just buy a Raspberry Pi, bro. You can't tell me, with all this news of them flying off the shelves, the high demand, people stressing out trying to get them, that if you walked into a store and saw one of these just sitting on a shelf, that you wouldn't be at least tempted to buy it. And surely I can't prove this as an actual strategy by Nintendo, but the past handling of releases would certainly suggest this. Again, when you look at all these systems, the amiibo, this trend is reoccurring so often, you can't help but think, sure, there's a lot of these factors that are going to play into it, but, I mean, when you've had this issue for so long, how have you not, devised some strategies to improve upon it, or at least make it better? I mean, if anything, sometimes it gets worse. Like, the situation with the Switch, I thought we were long over these kind of stock issues with gaming consoles. I mean, we honestly haven't seen a situation like the Switch since the Wii. And as I wrap, I can't really confirm how much or how little any of these factors really play into the low supply versus demand we often see from Nintendo. But I do think it's important to discuss the various aspects, because it really isn't ever as simple as just, oh, make more. Even if that is what us, the consumers, always say. But at the end of the day, it's on Nintendo to figure out how to alleviate these issues. So yeah, let me know what you think about Nintendo's consistent stock issues in the comments. What do you think causes the issues? How would you address them? As always, I'm Zaccari, and thanks for watching.